In the cold silence of the northern woods, where the branches tangle like ancient veins, and the snow sits heavy on every fallen trunk, there exists a breathless stillness that absorbs every sound. People who live in these remote places swear that sometimes the quiet becomes too quiet, so still, so unnatural, that even the wind seems afraid to pass through. It was on one such night that the event occurred, a night a creature long whispered about, long dismissed as myth and misinterpretation, crossed the threshold of a human home and shattered every certainty we thought we had about what roams the wilderness. This is the account, pieced together from recorded audio, scattered evidence, and the trembling words of the single man who survived long enough to tell what he saw before fading into near catatonic silence. He had been living alone on the ridge for nearly 9 years. A former surveyor turned recluse, he kept to himself in a modest cabin built of old pine boards and reinforced windows. He was used to the grunts of bears, the distant calls of moose, the cracking of frozen branches under the weight of wandering elk. But for weeks before the incident, he reported something else, a pattern of knocks, low rhythmic pulses echoing across the valley after midnight, as if someone or something were rapping massive knuckles against the trunks of trees in sequence. He described it as deliberate, organized, and uncomfortably intelligent. Neighbors chalked it up to loneliness and imagination intensified by isolation. But on the night of February 14th, at 2:47 a.m., his security recorder captured a sound that would rewrite the narrative. Footsteps, heavy enough that their vibrations triggered the motion sensors inside the house before anything even touched the door. The man, half asleep, woke to the sensation of tremors passing through the floorboards. He told investigators that the air felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. He remained in bed for several seconds, listening. The pacing was slow, with long intervals between each step, as though whatever was outside was testing the boundaries of the structure, studying its layout, almost learning it. Then came the smell strong enough to invade through sealed windows. A mixture of musk, wet earth, old fur, and something else he could never fully describe. Something metallic and primal that triggered a sense of danger deep in his chest. The door creaked once, softly, then again, louder, and then a third time, followed by a click that should have been impossible. The deadbolt turned. What stepped inside cannot be dismissed as a hallucination. The evidence, sparse but undeniable, aligns too precisely. The creature ducked its massive head beneath the doorframe as it entered the darkened living room. It stood nearly 8.5 feet tall, according to the height of the broken ceiling beam, later found split and hanging like a snapped bone. Its shoulders were impossibly broad, each movement revealing layers of thick, dense muscles shifting beneath coarse hair, the color of burnt cedar. Its chest was wide enough to nearly span the entryway, and its arms longer than any humans hung past the knees, ending in hands that looked both human and not, capable of frightening precision. The man froze in the hallway, peering through a narrow sliver between the wall and an open closet door. He whispered later that the creature's breathing was the strangest thing. Not heavy like a bear's, not hissing like a frightened animal. It was slow, controlled, and rhythmic, like something meditating, calculating, completely aware of its surroundings. It moved with a confidence that suggested this was not its first time entering a human home. The creature walked past the fireplace, pausing to touch the mantel with the back of its knuckles. It dragged its fingers along the wood, tapping lightly, listening to the hollow echo. Then it lifted a metal lantern with shocking delicacy, turning it slowly in its hand, examining its weight, its shape, its texture. There was nothing frantic or random about its actions. Every gesture was purposeful, almost ceremonial. Then came the behavior that baffled everyone. The Bigfoot and even the investigators reluctantly used that term began to mimic the environment. It crouched beside the old rocking chair and swayed back and forth, imitating the chair's motion. It pressed its massive palm against the mirror, then tilted its head, copying the tilt of its own reflection. This continued for over 40 minutes. According to the time-stamped audio, although the man's memory recalls it as feeling much longer, the creature's mimicry seemed less like play and more like study, as though it were gathering data about the objects humans surround themselves with. Halfway through its bizarre examination, the creature emitted a low, resonant hum. The frequency was so deep that loose items on a nearby shelf vibrated. The man felt the sound inside his body, not through his ears, but through his ribs, like a tuning fork struck against bone. What purpose the hum served remains unknown, though some theorists suggest it may have been a form of echolocation, mapping the structure of the room in a sensory language beyond human understanding. But the truly chilling moment occurred when the creature finally sensed the man watching. Without warning, it turned its head sharply toward the hallway. Its eyes, large, amber, and strangely reflective, locked onto the narrow gap where the man hid. The creature did not growl. It did not charge. Instead, it stood still for a long, suffocating moment. Then, to the man's horror, it stretched its mouth into what he described as an almost smile, a silent baring of teeth that seemed less threatening and more. Acknowledging Dot, it raised one hand and tapped its chest twice with its knuckles. Then it gestured toward the man's hiding place with a slow sweep of its fingers, not beckoning, but signaling awareness, a message that needed no words. "I know you are there." The man's fear overtook him. He stumbled backward, knocking over a broom. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the dead quiet of the cabin. The creature flinched, then straightened, adopting a posture that seemed almost defensive. Its breathing deepened. It took a single step forward, and the floor groaned beneath its weight. Dot, but instead of attacking, it performed another inexplicable act. It reached into the pocket of the coat hanging by the door. Inside that pocket, investigators later found bits of moss and dried pine needles that did not match any vegetation near the cabin. The creature withdrew an object from the pocket, a small carved stone, smoothed by time and shaped into a rough spiral. It set the stone gently on the table beside the door, pressing it down with the tip of its finger as though anchoring it in place. The significance of this remains a subject of fierce debate. A gift? A warning? A marker? Then, with a low exhale, the creature turned, ducked under the door frame once more, and stepped back into the night. The man heard its footsteps for several minutes as they faded into the trees, each step growing softer until the forest consumed them completely. When he finally dared to move, he found the house rearranged in subtle ways. The lantern positioned perfectly in the center of the mantel, the rocking chair angled toward the window, and the mirror wiped clean of dust by a massive, unmistakable handprint. Investigators found deep tracks circling the property in deliberate loops, as though the creature had walked around the house multiple times before deciding to enter. The prints were nearly 2 inches deep in frozen soil and measured 17 inches long. No known animal in the region matched them. The security recordings captured only sound, but those sounds were enough. The breathing, the tapping, the hum, and the slow turning of the deadbolt. Dot. As for the man, he left the cabin the following morning without taking a single personal item. He was found 2 days later at a ranger station, unable to sleep, unable to speak for long, muttering one repeated sentence whenever anyone pressed him for details. It wasn't wild. It knew what it was doing. To this day, the stone left. On the table sits inside a secure archive. Scientists who examined it found tool marks inconsistent with human instruments, and its spiral design matches no indigenous symbols known to the region. The forest where the encounter occurred remains closed for ecological restoration, though locals claim that the real reason has nothing to do with the environment. They say officials fear something else may be watching, waiting, observing from the shadows of the tall northern pines.